In Canto 24 of Purgatorio, Dante continues his long passage through the sixth terrace, where the penitents atone for the sin of gluttony. Dante notes that the gluttonous seem to be dead twice over, rimorte, as the pilgrim confronts their shades, supernaturally emaciated by an incorporeal famine. They circle their level of Mount Purgatory, taking solace from the pain they feel when they are repeatedly denied the fruit and the cascading water of two trees they pass in their revolutions. Both of these trees are offshoots of the tree of life from the Garden of Eden, as described in the book of Genesis. From each tree emanates a voice that, in the first instance, provides examples of temperance. From the second tree, which the pilgrim encounters near the end of this canto, they hear examples of gluttony. As always, Dante chooses exemplia from both Christian and the classical world to accentuate the universality of sin and virtue. After Dante receives both lessons and transits this ledge of the mountain, at the end of this canto, the angel of temperance erases the penultimate P from his brow. He is now ready to ascend to the final terrace, where lust is purged. What stands out to me in this entire episode of The Gluttonous, and in particular in Canto 24, is the ever-increasing parade of poets that accumulate to the pilgrim. Dante and Virgil have already been joined by the Roman poet Statius, and Dante's contemporary, the poet Forese Donati, adds himself to their group in Canto 23, and is still with them here. In Canto 24, we encounter the poet Buonaggiunta da Lucca, another of Dante's contemporaries, whom Dante engages in a detailed conversation about the poetry and poets of their day. I would like to look at this conversation and understand what is at stake and why it is important for Dante's ascent through Purgatorio. The conversation between Dante and Buonaggiunta is one of the most important biographical episodes in the entire poem, in which Dante tells us about himself and about his poetry. First, Buonaggiunta recognizes Dante as one who will visit Lucca. Remember, souls in the afterlife can see the future, and be welcomed warmly by a woman named Gentuca. Dante is likely telling us that in exile he had visited Lucca and met a woman who he calls Gentuca, perhaps even having given her that name in a poem he composed for her. After this moment of biography, masked as prophecy, Buonaggiunta then continues the conversation, but moves to the subject of Dante's poetry, asking if he is the one who authored the verses Donne che avete intelletto di amore, or ladies that have intelligence of love. This is the second occasion in Purgatorio where Dante has cited his own poetry in the mouth of a contemporary. Remember, Casella sang one of Dante's own poems to him and Virgil in Canto 2. And in this occasion, Buonaggiunta recites the central poem of the Vita Nuova, the collection of poetry a youthful Dante composed to celebrate his love for Beatrice. It is in this poem that Dante first claims that Beatrice, through her earthly goodness and beauty, can lead him to salvation. This revelation has expanded in the Divine Comedy, where now Dante's poetry about Beatrice can lead others, his readers, us, to our own salvation. In response to Buonaggiunta's question, Dante responds with one of the most famous and discussed terzine in the entire poem. He claims authorship by saying, "I am one who, when love inspires me, take note, and, as he dictates deep within me, so I set it forth." These three verses have come to be read as Dante's declaration of his theory of poetry, according to which poetry is inspired by love, and the poet is simply a conduit of this divinely inspired language into the world. What is this love that inspires the poet? Certainly this is the same love that inspires the first mover, God, to create the soul, as described with this exact language earlier by Dante in Purgatorio 17, and also in the next canto of Purgatorio. In short, Dante here is claiming that his poetic inspiration is analogous to the act of creation of the soul, performed with joy by God. Buonaggiunta responds to this claim by exclaiming that he now understands why Dante's poetry is different and better than his own and those of many other poets whom he then goes on to name in the same canto. He defines Dante's inspired poetry as the dolce stil novo, or the sweet new style, which in fact has become a historical term to identify the school of poetry that precedes and continues after Dante. Through his encounter with and exchange with Buonaggiunta, Dante is drawing a line between his own love poetry, which he claims is divinely inspired utterance, and other love poetry, which, we are left to infer, is not. Why does Dante choose to elaborate his poetic vocation at the level of gluttony? The first answer, I believe, is that Dante is preparing us for what is just up the road, the sin of lust. Love poetry, as we saw with Francesco in Canto 5 of Inferno, risks tempting the reader to the sin of lust. So here Dante can distinguish his love poetry from baser motives by showing that it has a salvific purpose. Another possible answer comes from the odd turn of phrase Dante uses to describe Buonaggiunta's muttering the name Gentuca, which sound came from his mouth where he felt most the justice that so wastes him. Dante here highlights the sin of gluttony as a sin of the mouth and a sin of ingestion. Buonaggiunta suffers because, as a poet, he used his mouth to sin by wanton consumption, when it should have been an instrument to pour forth inspired poetry, leading others towards true love. Gluttony replaces the primal good with desire for a secondary good, food and drink. For Dante, poetry illuminates the highest good by expressing it in the form of the word made evident in the world.